I will pass it on to our managing director, Andy King, to get us started.
Thank you, Adriana. And I'll make the intro of myself and our organization very short. We have, unfortunately, a large number of incidents to talk about that has happened over this last week plus. But FIRM is the national network, is the largest grassroots immigrant justice, immigrant rights network in the country. We are in over 30 states, and we've been around for over 2 decades. And what we fight for is to transform not just our immigration system, but to defend democracy and to fight for racial justice for all people living in this country that call it home. Um, I wish we were here under better circumstances, but I am just going to outline the purpose of this call. Many of you are aware of the hunger strikes going on right now and the horrific conditions that many of our community members and loved ones are experiencing in immigration detention. On top of that, in a little over the last week, we've seen a number of killings related to federal paramilitary presence in our states and our communities. Starting in July 5th, we will have Lisa Schumer Luna from the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition speak to that death in Memphis of a 20-year-old at the hands of National Guardsmen. On July 7th, Lorenzo Salgado Araujo was killed by ICE agents in Houston, Texas. We have Lizeth Chacon, Executive Director of Worker Defense Action Fund, to speak to that. And more recently, on July 13th, Juan Sebastian Guerrero was killed in Maine, again at the hands of ICE agents. We have, and I want to make sure I don't mess this up, Reverend Dr. Jody Hayashida from the Multi-Faith Justice Maine, which is a project of Maine People's Alliance, also a firm member, here to speak to that. And then we have with us as well our allies in labor, Nettie Dominguez, Executive Director of Organized Power and Numbers, and our mighty firm member from Minnesota to close us out, Emilia Gonzalez Avalos, Executive Director of Unidos Minnesota. And so with that, I'm just going to set out that these deaths did not need to happen. They are happening because of this administration's approach on immigration, which is meant to be chaotic, is meant to lead to violence, is overly aggressive, and we've all seen this play out over the last year plus, and it needs to stop. And we'll talk about some of the demands as we go along. But to kick us off, I'm going to send this over to Lisa Sherman Luna from Turk. Lisa.
Hi, all. Thank you so much for joining today. I am the Executive Director of the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition. Our headquarters are in Nashville, but we are statewide and have staff based in Memphis. Our belief is that no matter what you look like, where you were born, or how you practice your faith, every person deserves the freedom to live safely without the fear of law enforcement taking your life. This should be completely obvious and the bare minimum to expect from our government. But since the start of the second Trump administration, there have been 29 ICE-involved shootings with 11 people who have now died, not to mention the 52 lives lost while in ICE custody. These shootings are lawless and involve aggressive, dangerous conduct by unidentified officers in unmarked vehicles, and tactics like this have no place in our society. But this increasing violence and disregard for human life is inevitable when you have a presidential administration demanding mass deportations, calling for at least 1,000 arrests a day. This means that their efforts and strategies will keep getting more aggressive and violent in order to meet these demands that they have set. And that is based on white supremacist vision for our country. And now our communities, our neighbors, our loved ones are paying the price with their lives. And instead of protecting us, Congress is throwing fuel on the flames by rewarding ICE with a massive $250 billion budget. Our taxpayer dollars are being weaponized for private prison contracts, mass surveillance, family separation, and death. This sort of deadly fear is not new and has long been weaponized against the promise of American democracy. Black and brown communities have long faced similar sorts of violent reaction from law enforcement entities, though the scale and severity require a new response. Look to Memphis, the nation's largest Black majority city, as a window to the future, where a task force that includes the National Guard and 13 other federal agencies like ICE and Homeland Security have shot 5 people since May. 4 have been tragically murdered by federal agents. In just the last 2 weeks, Tyron Johnson was killed by the National Guard, and Alfonso Ivy was killed by other federal agents. Before that, it was Jonah Neal, a 25-year-old who was having a mental crisis, and Darren Pigram. The authoritarian coalition forced this occupation on our communities in Memphis by turning our government into a weapon against our people so they can seize power through fear, violence, and mass arrests and deportations of our neighbors, our friends, our loved ones. The administration is using Memphis as a testing ground for what a hostile government takeover of a city looks like, a blueprint of destruction that will expand to other states. It is the next frontier in this authoritarian regime. And we are going to see cities all across this country, but especially in the Deep South, that model this kind of deadly task force. And the costs are real. Families torn apart, 5 community members shot by federal agents. Every time we finish writing down these tragedies, another name is added to the list and calls us to reckon with our nation's history and ongoing reality of racialized violence, especially at the hands of the government that purports to serve us. We want to be perfectly clear. These systems are targeting Black and brown community members. It's not just immigrants who are impacted, but Black Americans who are suffering under this regime. And they are trying to normalize paramilitary forces in our neighborhoods. This only makes us less safe and become ways for private prison companies to profit billions while our communities are all less safe. But there's a growing and courageous chorus of Americans and Tennesseans who want our leaders to end this administration's mass deportation agenda and to stop the billions of taxpayer dollars that are being poured into ICE every year, as well as to end the occupations by National Guard troops, the collaboration between our state, local, and federal governments in taking over a historically and majority Black city in our state. Together, we're going to continue to fight for a future in which no law enforcement agent is allowed to murder our neighbors, but instead one we're all protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Now we have Lizette Chacon, Executive Director, Worker Defense Action Fund. Lizette.
Gracias, Andy. Hi, everyone. Lisa Chacon, Executive Director, Workers Defense Action Fund. We are a member-led organization here in Texas that organizes with immigrant workers. As a worker justice organization in Texas, I cannot help but see our members and Mr. Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, immigrant workers and their families. Like many of us, Mr. Lorenzo called Texas his home and had for the last 35 years of his life. He raised his family here, and each night he had dinner with his wife. They had 3 children, all U.S. citizens who have lost a father to the brutality of ICE, who will lay their father to rest far too early, who will watch their mother grow old without her partner because of the violent campaign of terror against our communities by ICE. Like our members, Mr. Lorenzo was a worker. He owned a small construction business, which allowed him to put all of his 3 children through college. And Mr. Lorenzo was committed to his own education as well. Before his death, the Salgado family had prepared for the possibility of him being detained, discussing his rights if he ever encountered immigration. He had even taken steps to pursue legal status. His petition for the right to be here was meeting the same never-ending delays that await the grand majority of immigrants who attempt to follow the process and adjust their status. When ICE approached Mr. Lorenzo on the day that he was killed, he was on his way to work with 3 of his co-workers, including his brother. Folks who work construction will tell you how often their tools are stolen, and this is a devastating loss for people who rely on their equipment to earn their living. We know that Mr. Lorenzo had anticipated and prepared for the possibility of being detained by ICE. We can assume that if he believed ICE was pulling him over, he would have responded in the manner his family had prepared him to respond. The story we are hearing from the administration fits a similar pattern as the ICE killings that come before. The shooting victim was entirely to blame, and little or no evidence appears to support that story. As was the case with ICE's other victims in Minnesota and also in Maine and across the country, there is an apparent unwillingness on the part of the federal government to provide a transparent investigation or access to the evidence. All they have offered is the infuriating argument and acknowledgement that Mr. Lorenzo was not even the man they were looking for. Another ICE error that is permitted to continue. Mr. Lorenzo built Houston. His labor helped to build families' houses, erected walls protecting children at schools, connected communities with bridges. From hiding in the shadows, Mr. Lorenzo proudly lived his life as an American, as a Texan, as a Houstonian, and the investment of his family made the people and community around him stronger. The people in administration responsible for his death are the ones who refuse to come into the light, the ones who deliberately are obscuring evidence, the ones to whom the truth is a clear threat, the ones building a machine that disappears people, no matter if they are working a job, pursuing status, or even US citizens. No one can be guaranteed safety from this rogue agency, which has terrorized our community since long before the current administration, but is now capturing and even widening net of Americans in their ruthless execution of the mass deportation agenda. To end this brutal campaign for good, we must abolish ICE and offer a pathway to citizenship for all. The officers responsible for the killing of Mr. Lorenzo must be held accountable. We can and must dismantle this agency because this ICE next victim could be any of us. Mr. Lorenzo could be any of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lizette. Now we have Reverend Dr. Jody Hayashida from the Multi-Justice Maine, a project of Maine People's Alliance. Reverend.
Thank you, Andy. Hi, everyone. I'm the Reverend Dr. Jody Cohen Hayashida. I organize Multi-Faith Justice Maine under the auspices of the Maine People's Alliance. When I woke up Monday to the news that ICE had shot and killed in Biddeford, someone that we quickly learned was 26-year-old husband and father Johann Sebastian Guerrero, what I first heard from community members was a flood of grief and anger. What I heard next, over and over, was we knew this death was coming. Of course, we knew this death was coming. We have been saying for months, some of us for years, in vigils and rallies and press conferences and op-eds and in our legislators' offices and in DC, that this kind of killing is the inevitable outcome of ICE policies and practices. When we first experienced our ICE surge here in Maine this winter, titled Operation Catch of the Day, our community members experienced the same terror campaign as so many others around the country. ICE staking out bus stops, apartment buildings, places of work, racially profiling and pulling over Mainers, smashing their windows, leaving their cars running on the side of the road, our neighbors afraid to go to work, go to the grocery store, go to the hospital. A week into the surge, Senator Susan Collins, facing significant backlash from her constituents, assured Maine that she had requested that ICE de-escalate their activities. And ICE did de-escalate their activities insofar as they changed their tactics, shifting from an overt attempt to inflict terror and into quiet and rapid detentions. Despite appearances, our immigrant communities continued to live their lives under constant threat, and so we knew this killing was coming. I will name that Johann was authorized to work in this country, that he had a social security number, that we are now hearing he was not the target of the warrant that ended his life. I will also name that those are the least important facts about Johann. The most important facts about Johann are that he was a full human, beloved, sacred, created in the image of God, that the life Johann created with his wife and daughter was full of love and joy, that Johann was part of the fabric of his community. He was on his way to work when he was shot and killed by ICE. The most important fact about ICE is that it is simply the latest vehicle in this nation's long-standing practice of racialized, state-sanctioned violence and terror. That this paramilitary force, accountable to nearly no one and funded by billions of dollars pulled from our housing and healthcare, does not provide the safety or security it promises. It is a threat to the well-being of all people. We knew this death was coming, just like the people in Texas knew the killing last week was coming, just like the people of Florida, where someone was killed this morning, knew that death was coming. Because we know that death is an inevitable consequence of the existence of ICE, modifications to practices and policies are not enough. In the very short term, ICE must not be allowed to investigate itself. We demand a full, transparent accounting of every single death. And then we demand that Congress stop funding this violence and remove ICE from our communities altogether. Every life is sacred. We demand that this nation treat every life as such. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. And with regards to Florida, why we don't have all the facts, what we can say undeniably is it was a needless death that was a result of the fear caused by ICE operations. And we'll have more on that, I'm sure, as more information becomes available. I'd like to introduce Nettie Dominguez, Executive Director of Organized Power in Numbers, a trusted firm ally. Nettie.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nady Dominguez, Executive Director of Organized Power Numbers, and a member of the executive team of Mayday Strong, a national network of local and national community organizations and labor unions. Lorenzo was killed heading to work with his construction crew, which included his own brother. Johann was killed driving to work. These weren't immigration encounters that happened to involve workers. These were workers killed doing the very thing that keeps this country going, driving to and from work. That makes this a labor issue, not just an immigration issue. Lorenzo spent 35 years building homes in Houston. Johann worked 2 jobs, cleaning at a veterinary clinic and in the morning and delivering food in the afternoon to support his partner and their 3-year-old daughter in Bedford, Maine. They were doing exactly what so many working people do every single day across this country, and it cost them their lives. I am an immigrant myself. I was once undocumented myself in this country, and now I am a mother of 3-year-old twins. And I cannot shake the gut feeling of rage and pain just thinking about what that little girl is going through, what that mother is going through. People should be able to go to their jobs without worrying that an ICE agent is going to shoot them and kill them. Going to work has become dangerous because of who you are, who we are, where you live, or where you work. Both men were killed by federal agents with no body cameras. In both cases, agents accused these men of using their vehicles as weapons against them, or said that they fear for their own lives because of the cars. It's the same accusation we heard from DHS against Renee Good in Minneapolis months earlier. This is not a coincidence. It is very much a script, and this is not what accountability looks like. This is what happens when an agency knows it doesn't have to answer to anyone, and it has a complete open book and a blank check to do whatever they want. ICE is not going to hold itself accountable. We're going to have to hold them accountable, and employers, unions, and labor organizations cannot sit and will not sit at the sidelines. Employers who have relied on workers like Lorenzo or Johann for decades cannot stay quiet while their own workers are being targeted by our government. You cannot depend on a workforce for your business and stay silent while those same workers are being targeted and being shot on their way to work. That silence is a choice. Unions and labor advocates have a responsibility too, to say clearly that worker safety does not end at the shop door or at the work site. Workers have the right to get to work and get home without risking their lives. Any government agency and agent that violates that right has to be held responsible for their actions, not a press release claiming self-defense with no evidence behind it. So our demand, in solidarity with all of our partners and our community across the country, is simple. In Texas, release the witnesses. Lorenzo's brother, Victor, is already scheduled to appear in immigration court in the next few weeks. The man who saw ICE kill his own brother should not be deported before he can even testify. That cannot happen. We need to conduct real independent investigations in Houston and Bedford, not agency investigating themselves. And every employer, every union, every labor advocate needs to say publicly that freedom to work means workers deserve to come home after work. Workers do not forfeit their right for safety because of their immigration status. Lorenzo and Johan were fathers, partners, workers, and beloved members of their communities, and we cannot let ICE make going to work a death sentence for all workers in our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Nettie. And to close us out, Emilia Gonzalez Avalos, Executive Director of Unidos, Minnesota. Emilia.
Thank you so much, Andy. I'll begin by saying that the violence, the pain, and the grief we lived through Minnesota this winter has now spread to communities all around this country. Today, we grieve another 3 men, family members, killed this past week on their way to work, dying in the streets of Texas, of Maine, and of Florida. They were going to work. That's the whole story, as Nady shared. We know this grief here. Renee Good and Alex Pretty, who were killed in our streets. Victor Diaz, who died in custody 6 months ago here in Minnesota. As my colleague Lisa from Turk mentioned, this is not a string of terrible accidents. This recklessness is the result of 3 choices this administration made. They criminalized immigrants and everyone who believes in multiracial democracy. They promised their agents immunity, and they set a quota of 2,000 arrests per day. So first, the criminalization. I said these neighbors were threats to public safety. The people who watch them die say otherwise. A neighbor heard John Guerrero say, "I was trying to stop," as he lay bleeding in the street in front of his 3-year-old daughter. His family was shouting, "You took her dad, you took her dad." Lorenzo Salgado Araujo lived here 45 years and was almost a citizen. When 2 unmarked cars came at his work van, he likely thought someone was trying to steal his tools, as it was mentioned already. The witness inside the van, including his own brother, says ICE's story is false. All of those witnesses are still in ICE custody. The only people who can contradict the government are being held by the government. Second, the immunity. After Renee Good and Alex were killed, DHS took evidence from the scene. But their investigation was not about the killers. It was about the victims. They called Renee Good and Alex domestic terrorists. The vice president said that the agent who shot Renee will not be charged because, and I quote, "that guy is protected by absolute immunity." Stephen Miller told every ICE officer in the country that they have federal immunity. The agent who shot Renee went back to work. And just this morning, the president said ICE agents are already doing a great job and called traffic stops one of their most effective tools. Traffic stops. This is how Joan and Lorenzo were approached. It took 6 months for the Justice Department to begin sharing evidence with our own state and local law enforcement. 6 months. And third, the quotas. The New York Times reported that ICE officials were told 2,000 arrests a day is the new standard. Agents are taking people at traffic stops, at work sites, at courthouses, at gas stations, at grocery stores. They say they're targeting criminals. A quota does not find criminals. A quota gets filled by profiling Black and brown people, and it brings exactly what it was brought: separated families, wrongful detentions, injuries, chaos, and death. And dying does not stop in the streets. 2,000 arrests a day has to go somewhere. It goes into the cages. Last year, at least 31 people died in immigration custody, the deadliest since 2004. Doctors found 95% of those deaths were preventable. Nearly 3 out of 4 people locked up were never convicted of anything. And this summer, this government sent pregnant girls, some of them 13 years old, because some of them pregnant because they were raped, into a facility that it had already faulted for failing to care for children. So here's what these families are owed: a real independent investigation into every one of those killings and every death in custody. The evidence that the footage turned over now, not in 6 months. Those witnesses released and that quota rescinded. This pattern of lawlessness cannot continue. All of this was designed to make us afraid, but they did not account on our courage. Neighbors, families, co-workers, clergy, and local elected officials had stood up and told the truth. Across the country, there are trainings for people to be constitutional observers, and it has worked. The people, regular Americans, are building the public safety that actually includes and is accountable to all of us. So the families of Joanne, of Lorenzo, of Renee, of Alex, of Victor, and the victims in detention deserve better than this. And all of us firm organizations and our partners in faith and labor will continue to organize until justice and freedom is delivered to all working people, no exceptions. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Amelia. And before I open up to questions, just to reiterate, first and foremost, we here at Firm and our allies, we demand justice and full and independent investigations for each of those killed at the hands of federal agents. But moreover, these deaths and the violence will not stop until Congress delivers a pathway to citizenship for all of our undocumented community members, that we get ICE and these violent federal agents out of our communities, and that we have no more cover-ups. We demand accountability sooner than later, but eventually we will have accountability for all the abuse of rights, all the violence inflicted on community members. And then we also, again, want to reiterate an invitation and an urgent ask and demand of employers, corporations, small business owners to not facilitate this violence, to do what they can to help keep our community members safe. We expect that they would be good neighbors, be part of the community, and do everything they can to create safety. And then lastly, we call for an end to the funding of this violent and dangerous paramilitary force, as well as the detention facilities that have wreaked havoc on so many families. We need answers, we need accountability, and we need independent investigations. And Firm and our allies will keep fighting for these things until we have them, because everyone deserves the freedom from violence and fear that for too long under this administration has just created so much chaos and pain. With that, I'm going to open it up to questions and ask Adriana Granado, our Firm Communications Director, help me direct who should be asking questions.
Good afternoon. I want to open up the space for about 3 to 5 questions. If there are any, feel free to use the chat or just come off mute and introduce yourself, name and outlet, and we will try to answer your questions as best as possible. Once again, we have our folks here from Minnesota, Tennessee, Maine, Texas. So if folks want to direct some questions to them, this would be the opportunity. If not, thank you for joining. And there will be a recording of this press conference after the call. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Okay, well, with that being said, I really appreciate everyone coming together for this moment.
Thanks, everyone.